So welcome everyone to Leading Change. This is the fourth virtual session offered by ILX over this period of change. Our first one was resilience, and in that we started to look at some of the ways you can help build resilience and encourage resilience in others in times of difficulty. We also looked at human reactions to change. So for those of you who were on that session, we had a quick look at the transition curve, and I introduced you to something called the 4 laws of change. We're going to be revisiting those topics today and building on them heavily as well, because today is all about leading change, which means we need to have that understanding of what people are going through as well. The other 2 sessions were managing virtual teams and crisis management. And at the very end of crisis management, we positioned how sometimes, if we lead in the right way, we can turn a crisis into an opportunity. And there was lots of talks about things like timing as well. Not everyone is ready to see an opportunity when they're suffering, but that's another theme that we're going to be building on here. What if you've seen an innovation or an opportunity that's come out of the recent situation and that now you want to get your company, your team, your department to embrace? How can we lead that change? More hellos from North Yorkshire and Johannesburg. Keep them coming, by the way, guys. It's lovely. It's all good stuff. So let's do a quick look at our domestic points as we go through this session. As you've joined, you've been placed on mute. We're not trying to be impolite there. This is to mute the background noise. So just while I've been speaking, we've gone up to 201, 202 attendees now. The background noise generated there is really, really high. So we generally keep you on mute. If you have the option, if you have the ability, feel free to unmute yourself and ask a question at any time. We really mean this. I'm the kind of trainer, I love being interrupted. I love debate points. If someone has a question, with 207 people currently online, the chances are that question is going to be on at least 20 or 40 other people's minds anyway. A really good way to ask questions is to use the question box. So lots of you have been doing that already. I can see a couple of people have got a sound issue there. Lots of people have been doing that already with the questions box, which is great. That's how you've been saying hello from Milton Keynes, Germany, Spain, Austria, Manchester, etc., etc. I'll try and keep an eye on those questions coming in. If I miss anything, I'll come back to it at the end. But again, if you have a question, definitely ask away. And here's some advice. Take notes as we go through. Now, what we're going to do is send over a single page summary handout on Friday, which is a summary of this session, some of the key points. In addition, on Friday, the recording goes live on the ILX YouTube channel. But by all means, keep notes as we go through. In fact, for one of the exercises later on, I'd be really grateful if you can try and make sure you have a notepad and pen in front of you, just so you can write down 2 or 3 numbers when we're looking at engagement techniques. One final quick point is a really handy little tool is Control Print Screen on your keyboard. What that enables you to do is to take a very quick snapshot of that really useful tool or model or point that's on the screen at the time, and then copy and paste that into a Word document. We invite you to do that. It's absolutely fine. So make notes however you want to and however you see fit. Okay, moving on, what we'll have a look at today. I've got the whole lot on screen there for you. I won't read it out because it's always annoying when people just read out what's on screen, and I have been doing that for the last 2 slides. So as an overview, we're going to look at what enables people to lead change well. And I'm going to show you, you already know this. All we're going to do is spend that incredibly valuable time reflecting on those points for a little bit. This will just reaffirm you in terms of when you come to lead change, thinking about the right way to do it in terms of leadership attributes and the wrong way to do it. We'll have another quick look at that transition curve, and that will also have us give us an opportunity to have a look at how people are responding and reacting to change. From that, we can then look at some of the more interesting ways to lead change, and that's where we started to get into things like storytelling, how to take people on a journey with you, an emotional journey that leads them to engaging with the new innovation, work process, way of life, or situation that they're facing. And as we evolve through this agenda, we're going to see more and more a coaching approach. So as we move into the 4 laws of change, we're going to see how we ultimately can encourage people to take ownership of what's happening to them, feel that you are listening and supporting them, but make the change their own. And that's quite a big takeaway and a key thing from those 4 laws of change, that it's all about getting people to own the change themselves and therefore it requires so much less leadership time from our points of view. Okay, that's a little bit on what we're going to be covering through. Let us dive straight in, and I'm going to show you that you already know so much of this stuff. Most of us have been through good change programs and bad change programs by now. Now, what I was going to do was just generally give you the results of a survey that looked at what people liked in their leaders when they were leading change and what people didn't like. However, I know that we have quite a few people on this session that have attended other sessions as well, and you are a reasonably chatty bunch, which I absolutely adore. So instead, can you put into the question box any really positive attribute of a leader during change? What have you seen people doing? How have they behaved? What works? When a leader is leading a change, how should they be with their people? Thank you for starting us off, Daniel. That's absolutely excellent. So we start off with empathy. Strong communication from Mel. Motivating from Anne-Marie. Absolutely. Transparent, honest and transparent. Good listener, clear and calm. Open communication, resilience, good listening, honesty, informing about. So absolutely, flexibility, focused. Constraint, confident, good listener, giving innovation a chance. And you already know this. Humble, I love that. Involvement in change processes. Honesty in big capitals from Shona. You're absolutely right, guys. You already know this. Here are some of the key things that come out when people are surveyed, as you have absolutely demonstrated here as well. Trustworthy and credible. And linked in with that is all the words like transparency and honesty that you had up there, clear communication. Engaging, can share a vision. So that's the motivating bit, and the clear communication. Open to questions. Absolutely. And last but not least, and the three that we've got up on screen, this is not the exhaustive list at all, care about your people. And I think that comes in with the solidarity, absolutely, sense of humor, ready to serve, reassurance, yeah, all good things. Ladies and gentlemen, you already know what attributes we should show when leading change. But here's the thing. Change can be stressful for the leader as well. It can be really stressful for the manager. Sometimes we can be having a change forced upon us, and that means we don't always give our very, very best in general situations. You're welcome, Nicola, no problem. And at that time, even the best intentioned human beings can be pretty rubbish leaders of change. So again, I want you to think about this and write into the question box. What are the really bad attributes or behaviors? What should you try and make sure you don't do when particularly you're leading a change? What have you had from leaders in the past that's absolutely been rubbish, that's harmed your engagement? Blinker, don't listen to everything. That's everything Trump does, okay? Blame game, be unavailable, lack of clarity. Believe I'm always right, ignored, patronized, lost control, gossip, shouty people, their own way. So dictatorship, autocrat, yeah, ignored, lack of communication, too directive. So absolutely, pretend everything will be great. So we have a lack of honesty here, pretending that things are happening. And we have this idea that when people are really, really stressed, often what they try and do is seize control. A lot of really bad leaders in change become micromanagers and dictators. And absolutely, so you guys, you've probably seen this, unfortunately, in different places you've worked. Of course, not where you're currently working, wherever that may be. I'm sure it hasn't happened there at all in the slightest. People can get frightened. They can get stressed. They can clamp down on the control. They can also play their own political games and self-serving interests as well. So in any change situation, here's a beautiful thing. You already know how to do the good stuff and the bad stuff. Just think to yourself, the best leader of change, what were their behaviors? The worst leader of change I know, what were their behaviors? What will my behaviors be? And when you are stressed, that will just reaffirm your purpose, reaffirm your brand, and help you think, you know what, I already know what to do here. I need to be open with my team about such and such. I need to actually spend some time listening to them, or whatever the particular action those behaviors lead you to. So that's a little bit to show you that you already know so much of this. And I think that's quite a good lesson whenever we're in these difficult situations as well. Let's move on a little bit and play with some of the psychology of change. We're going to go back first of all to one of the tools that we looked at in the resilience session. So that's the change curve, sometimes known as the transition curve. And what we find is in almost any type of change, for example, a new innovation that is happening that you want people to engage with, a change to a working practice or a major process change, or even something like an IT change or systems change, people generally have the same kind of reactions. Now, this curve is a stylized curve. You'll notice it doesn't have any actual units in it. There isn't percentages or 1, 2, 3, 4. That's because, for example, with the timing axis, everyone's different. People can go through the same change, and for some people, they'll be through it in an hour in terms of their reaction. Other people, it might be a few days. So this is a generalized curve. Let's have a fast recap of how most people go through change. Let's say I'm going to make an announcement. We're all going to get a new email system. You what? No, that can't be happening. That's crazy. Our current one only just about works, and that's bad enough. We don't need more change. So in the very, very start of almost any change announcement or any change realization, you get shock. You what? Followed by denial. No, they wouldn't do that to us. Or that would be too expensive. Or that can't be happening because the implications are too big. Let's say you're having a major cultural workplace change. So for example, a lot of us are finding that they may well be doing a lot more agile working and virtual working after the COVID-19 crisis starts to die down more. That represents a really, really big cultural change. And the first thing that probably would have happened a few weeks ago is people would have said, no, that won't work for my office. That won't work for my thing. So it's the shock and the denial that kicks in almost straight away. After we get the shock and denial, generally we start to move into the emotional side. And there's kind of two elements to this. First one is the anger and frustration. In the resilience WebEx, I gave a description of, let's say I had lost my phone on a train. Shock, no, 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 this can't be happening. Denial, this can't be happening. It's got to be here. The implications are enormous. And then in this case, the anger and frustration. Oh, Nick, you idiot. Why did you do that? You knew it was going to happen at some point and you haven't got it insured. And the anger and frustration is actually going to be directed at myself. In these situations, the anger and frustration is directed at whomever the individual sees as the agent of change. So in the phone fiasco, I'm angry at myself because I've been the person that's left the phone on the train. If someone tells me there's going to be a big change in my working practices, I may well be angry at the individual or representative team, committee, group of managers who seem to be putting the change on us. Shannon says, what about the current problem, e.g. trying to achieve change at great speed, unable to meet up with the team in person, me and Poison in position to affect major cultural change, but unable to take the steps I would have before. Yep, okay, so I'm going to come to that in just a second. Yes, indeed, and me about the ancient change. So yeah, we're going to come to that in a bit, Shona, absolutely. So what we're going to do is look at how we can speed those change processes through to start to manage against some of the resistance points. So this is just a quick recap of this is how we go through the change generally without interference. We have the shock, denial, anger and frustration. We eventually get on board with it. We start to explore things, but we're not happy here. The exploration stages of people are dipping their toe in the water to see how hot or cold it is, but they're still carrying a hell of a lot of emotion at this point. Eventually, given time and support, we get to a balanced place. We often call that integration. And hopefully, if it's a new innovation, if Shona, like you're talking about, actually there's an opportunity to improve things, we might even find people that are happier, more productive and motivated as we go through as well. Now, from a leadership point of view, sorry, just quickly, why is the shock going down in the curve and denial is going up? Because the denial feels good. It's a soft, warm blanket that wraps around you. This isn't going to happen to us. This isn't going to happen to us. Here's an interesting one. We noticed that when people have new systems put upon them, just before they transition to the new system, while they're in that anger point, often the productivity of the old system boosts up. We get a denial of, this is the wrong thing to do. We shouldn't be introducing the new system here. Let me show you how great the old system is. It's a pointless denial, but it's very human. It's very real as well. Now, the correct way to lead through here, we'll break this down into our 4 stages: denial and shock, anger, frustration, moving into the unhappy acceptance moving up to exploration and almost onto integration, and our final stage, productive and motivated. Here is how we can lead in each of these situations. And the diagram that's about to pop up is on the handout for you as well, by the way. In the Diane shock, we want to reiterate the message. We need to keep telling people that the change is happening. And one of the best ways to get their buy-in that the change is happening, because it's all about moving them through that curve as quickly as possible, is to make sure you clearly explain the why. Be prepared to keep explaining this again and again and again and again. Reiterate. Your job is to get this to be believed, to get people through to the acceptance stage. And in the process of that, you're going to get a whole load of emotion. So that's the opportunity to listen, show empathy, allow their emotions to surface. And as someone mentioned in the bad examples of leading change, actually don't tell everyone it's going to be great here at this point. Let's say I've just been told that I need to start getting familiar with a whole load of conferencing tools that I haven't been familiar with in the past, and that I'm never going to be in the office ever again. At this point, I'm thinking, this is ridiculous. This is silly, crazy. No, this can't be happening. If someone then says, Nick, this is wonderful, it's just all brilliant, what they're showing is a complete lack of empathy to my emotional state. By the way, that example isn't a very real one. I do lots of virtual working. I love it. So we're showing emotion here. I love the comments. It's great. We're showing some empathy for people's emotion and allowing that emotion to surface at this point. As they start to come on board and we start to get a simmering down of the emotion, bearing in mind that emotion won't be gone, but it may start to visually slimmer down, that's where we can start to move people through the team. We've got on the screen there, give recognition and highlight positives. It's the correct leadership behavior, but we do need to be careful doing it, because if there's a time when your team will be spread out across this curve, it will be just there. And you may have some people who are actually moving into the integration and productive and motivated, or some people are still stuck in the anger and frustration. So try not to split the team too much, but give recognition for people who do engage and highlight the positives of engagement. This isn't about favoritism. It's about trying to show the positive examples. A quick bit of advice, my own personal here. I always used to try and engage the biggest detractors at this point and turn them into my advocates. Get Dave, who's really anti the new system, to use the new system, and get Dave to do a report on what he didn't like, but also what the positives are. So everyone gets to see Mr. Anti the new system talk about some of the positives. Finally, we get people to where they are actually using the new system or comfortable with the new way of working, and that's where we pass control to them as much as possible. That's where you get them to start shining and having those innovative ideas. So that's a very quick review on how we go through the leadership on the transition curve, the change curve. It's always worthwhile remembering it is absolutely natural for people, all of us people, to resist change to some element. So on the screen, we've just popped up some things that we looked at again with the resilience piece. Familiarity bias and sunken cost fallacy. They may be some good Google points, some good jumping off points for you. Very basically, familiarity bias shows that we are always having a preference for the way things are and what is familiar to us. And there's some really good evolutionary reasons for that as well. Sunken cost fallacy means if you invested lots of time and energy becoming an expert in a system, we feel deeply connected to that system and we don't want to let it go. There's lots of different heuristic algorithms and heuristic biases going on. I mean, us humans, we are not big fans of change. So we're taking people through this transition curve, but let's look at some better ways that we can start to take people on the journey. And that is exactly what we're going to do now. So we're moving into some more advanced psychology here. It's always good fun. Actually, I say more advanced. We're going to start a good 2,500 years ago with ethos, pathos, logos, and kairos. So these are the Greek. I wonder if anyone can just put in the chat box who they think that is a picture of. I wonder if you can remember, if you can guess. You've probably got about a 1 in 3 chance of getting it right. Go on, have a guess. Have a guess. I know you want to. Who is that a picture of? Ancient Greek, Hercules, Aristotle, Socrates. Joe, you win. Absolutely. It's Aristotle. It was probably going to be Aristotle, Socrates, or Plato, wasn't it? So this is work by Aristotle where he was looking at the power of rhetoric, of engaging an audience or making a persuasive argument. He describes 4 elements. He says, first of all, we have ethos. This is authority and credibility. How much are you trusted? How much were you believed in the past? Positions of authority can bestow credibility, by the way, and credibility can bestow authority. We're not going to do a deep dive on this, but so much of this is about your brand, your qualifications, your positional title. Are you, at its essence, believed? The next piece, pathos is the emotion. It's the story. It's the ability to connect with people's fears and connect with their hopes. On its highest plane, it's the ability to ask a question and get people to use their imagination that then links in with their fears or hopes. Logos, how a lot of us feel that we communicate. This is the logic, the reason, the facts. This is where we say, hey, everyone, this is a good idea because it will save us X amount. It will open up a new market. It will enable us to be more agile. It will enable us to pivot in the market circumstances. This is often where we build a business case. And kairos, often the forgotten one, by the way, the time and the place. Now, what absolutely oodles and oodles of research has shown is that if you were to pick one of these elements, which is more powerful at influencing, persuading, and engaging human beings than any of the others, there is a clear winner. And no surprise, it's the emotional element. So we've known about this for a long time. Emotions and stories that can connect with emotions are incredibly powerful marketing tools, for example. Big Tobacco in the way back when was using this. For example, the Joe Camel advertising campaign, often seen as one of the most successful advertising campaigns of all time, was all about telling that story and getting people on board with that story. Shona's just written, my difficulty is person senior to me does not think there will be a change problem, but I think there will be and want to take people with me, hence why I want senior people involved. Yeah, this is good. So it sounds like, Shona, you're thinking about things like Kotter's 8 Steps, which starts talking about getting a senior cheerleading party, almost a powerful coalition on board at the start. So again, some of these techniques will enable you to take your people on board with you regardless of what the most senior people are doing in terms of allowing you resources to take people on board with you. So a great way to do a change program is to throw resources at it and give lots and lots of people training about why the change is happening. But you know what, at its heart, a single leader can tell a story. And again, that's kind of just what we're about to come on to as well. Emotions are powerful, incredibly powerful. So let's have a look at some of the story structures that you can use to explain what's happening, why it's happening, what needs to happen in the future, and have people engaged instead of resistant. The first one that we're going to look at is referred to as the call to action story, but it's also sometimes called the chronological story technique as well. You'll see why both titles apply. What we're doing is basically exploring the past, for example, why we have the current situation and what the current situation means. Next, we look at, if we don't do any changes, what could happen in the future. Our next element is, okay, if this is going to happen in the future, what can we do to avoid or capitalize on that situation? That's what we often refer to as the solution. And finally, a clear statement of what needs to happen next. So let's have a look at this in a little bit more detail. And Shona, so this is a way that I would describe a story or tell a story to my team to engage them with the change. And this means that we don't need that super senior sponsorship at all. So in the past, why the current system or state exists, don't attack what's currently in place. Let's say you're making a suggested change to a way of working or a new IT system. Don't attack the current thing. It puts people's backs up. But do explore why it is no longer fit for purpose or why we might be missing a big opportunity. So in the past, we had this system and it did X and it did X quite good. Currently, we've got massively higher demand and the system can't scale. In the future, that means we're not going to be able to service all of our clients. So the next bit is we're looking at what the key problems are and the implications of those. And there's some particular phrasing here as well. Shona, I love that you're putting in a new IT system. So much of this stuff is incredibly relevant for getting people to engage IT changes. And I'll share some more of the techniques as we go through as well, with particular examples to IT changes. So we're generally playing with at the moment IT changes and culture changes, because those are the, process changes, because these are the biggest ones that are happening. I'll dip and dive into a couple of other examples as we go through as well. So we're looking at the past, we're looking at the present, and the future is all about the burning platform and the reward. Now, a burning platform is a terrible situation that people seek to avoid. By the way, the phrasing comes from the Piper Alpha disaster in the North Sea, where people were faced with literally a burning platform they had to jump off of. Now, they were jumping off into the North Sea, into 40-foot high waves, where there was fire because the oil had ignited and lumps of twisted steel sticking out. You need a strong motivation to make that jump. There's a guy who's interviewed in the hospital called Andy Mohan, and famously he's interviewed and asked, why did he jump? And he said, because I was faced with certain death or possible death. Burning platform, you need to show how there is a bad situation coming, but also link that with a reward. Here is an opportunity to avoid the bad situation or do something really positive as well. Dave says, I don't like the term IT change. They rarely just IT changes. They may be a new IT system, but they are changed to process. Yeah, absolutely. So therefore they are a business or process change. Absolutely, far more accurate. And we can position it in a more favorable way there as well. So we've gone through the past, the present, the future. Now we need to give us the solution. Now we need something that represents, this is how we're going to avoid the bad and realize the good. And then we have and in order for us to move forward, we need you now to, and whatever the clear action is. If it's a user group, then it's log on, create your first account, give it a play and do the systems testing or the user acceptance testing. If it's a senior, because you're presenting upwards to get a change, then now what we need you to do is review our second meeting where we'll present a financial business case for you and give us the sign off, or whatever that clear action is. So our first system, past, present, future and what that means, solution to realize a beautiful future and avoid the burning platform, clear action. It's lovely, it's handy, it's good. It is a journey that you can take people on. Here's an even more powerful one. So this is particularly for managing very strong emotional resistance to an idea. This one is particularly good, by the way, when you're trying to get a big cultural change happening. I'm working with one company at the moment that's just changed its bonus structure. People have gone from earning unlimited bonuses to having their bonus capped at 200%. Now you may think, bonus at 200%, oh my goodness, aren't these lucky people? But actually, if you've been used to possibly earning a 400% bonus, someone has just taken a big chunk of your salary. There is big resistance to this system. So here's how we start to take people on board with a diversity and inclusion campaign or a major change to a process or system. The first thing we're going to do is show empathy and link with their emotional state. Now, you don't have to agree with their point, but what you can do is link with their emotional state. So absolutely, Nicola, this is particularly useful for big M&As as well. So if you're going through a merger, I mean, there's all kinds of emotions flying around here. What we want to try and do is link to a positive growth mental state in the middle of a merger and acquisition. It can be done. This is how we can do it. It's tricky, but it absolutely can be done. So we link with their emotional state. We then describe a situation, an event, a realization, an epiphany, whereby we personally were able to start to let go of the old, where we realized that maybe our emotional reaction was exactly that, an emotional reaction, where we realized that maybe the new way of working might possibly be okay. Then you move their emotional state by reaffirming that positivity and also reaffirming the old state. And what we're doing is we are absolutely taking people on an emotional journey and changing how they're thinking of something. Let me show you in a little bit more detail how this might play out. So I give an example of introducing a inclusivity campaign. This is a fascinating one for me. The psychology is really interesting. The number of white, middle class, middle-aged male boards that have told me they obviously don't have an inclusivity problem. They're just curious about this. And I think, you're clearly good people, absolutely. But there's a complete lack of awareness, and clearly there'll also be little elements of resistance as well. Occasionally, one of those board members will say something like this. Look, I'm absolutely on board with having greater gender representation. I think it's crazy that we don't have this. But we should always be allowed to give the right job to the right man. That's just how it goes. The best person for the best job. We shouldn't have targets. We shouldn't be going out of our way to promote people who may not be suitable for the role. It's a really common point. So what I'm going to do here, Amanda says, preach. Absolutely. Well, no, we don't want to preach. Actually, that's a key thing. We don't want to preach. The temptation is to immediately dive in there and explain what's going on there. But we don't get a win there. Get a sense of satisfaction, but no win. The win is changing that individual's mind. So here I might say, absolutely, I completely agree. I get really frustrated when people tell me that I should be recruiting to a target instead of recruiting the best person. And by the way, that's a natural and I think quite logical feeling. What fascinated with me was when I read some research about the Hubble Space Telescope. I mean, I hold up very highly people in the scientific community, and I imagine these are really smart, incredibly bright people making really rational, unbiased decisions. Turns out, no, they had a massive bias going on that was giving telescope time to men more than women. And you know what really impressed me? They were so smart, they realized what they were doing. All they did, by the way, was they just anonymized all of the application data. So it was only about the project, never about the person. And overnight, they saw a change in how they were allocating that time. For me, it was brilliant to see people that bright understand what was happening and make a correction. And now they have greater diversity in terms of the events that they're looking at. Then we're moving to the next bit. So now we're going to start talking about the positives, and we're also going to link back to the negative as well. So for me, one of the things that I've done is randomize all the data. So I remove all the data on any kind of application. And also we've started to look at purely the events and actions instead of any personal data. And I still find it weird. So that's the link back to the old bit. I still find it weird doing this, but I've got to say, we're getting a different standard of candidate coming through now as well. It's brilliant. So there we go. We're linking with the old emotional state, talking about what changed our minds, and then showing how the new system is providing a positive, but we still haven't, fully jumped on board and seeing, oh, this is all unicorns and rainbows, and I love this immediately. We're still showing some links back to the old emotional state. That keeps our connection of empathy with those people as well. Just going to check in on some of these questions as well. If you allow ownership, the quality of productivity goes up and vested interest in the future. Absolutely, Nicola, you're so right. Nicola's also added, my fingers seem to be all over the place spelling, sorry, never a problem. Don't care about your spelling in the question box. That's not a problem in the slightest. Okay, so there's two really powerful models, ways of structuring a story, sharing with people what's happening and why, and also taking them on that emotional journey of this is the resistance point. This is where I realized there was something else going on. This is actually the new way of working that I quite enjoy. And I still hark back to the old point. However, it still works. So Joe said, so it's any story that resonates, not one that you've personally experienced. Note on stories, they need to be true. Otherwise, you're affecting your leadership brand. So ideally, do some deep soul searching. So this is a good question, Joe, and find that event or realization that moved you. Why did you suddenly realize that the new IT system was a good idea? Why did you suddenly realize that actually, although the new working process was generally difficult to adapt to, it did have some positives? Find the thing that changed your mind and try and tell a true story. If not, you can tell a story about others. So my story about the telescope, the Hubble telescope, was all about these were the people that role modeled a behavior that helped me realize that smart people change their mind about stuff. Hope that helps a little bit. Okay, let's have a look at some advanced influence skills now that can be linked with these stories. And everything that we cover through, and indeed everything that we have covered through across this entire series of WebExes, can all be linked together. So our advanced influencing skills. There's three that we're going to look at. The first one is called Name the Fear. I'm going to tell you a little bit about it. As we go through this as well, please feel free to continue to use the question box and chat box, sorry, the question box to ask questions as we go through here. So name the fear. A lot of this comes from things like psychological counseling, cognitive behavioral therapy. Let's say I have someone who is frightened of flying. They don't want to get on a plane. I might say something like, what particularly is the fear? What's the worry or concern? And that's where they'll say, well, the worry or concern is, dying or falling. Okay, and what's the event that leads up to that? So what I'm trying to do is get them to be kind of specific. Well, something goes wrong with the engines. Okay, so this all sounds like a rational fear. Let's explore whether it's a high risk system or not. Dear person, what would you like to know, see, or understand so that it reduced your fear of engines failing? Because that seems quite rational. So what would you like to know, see, or understand to reduce that fear? At which point the individual might say, well, I think, I'd want to know that they were really well maintained, that really good, accurate engineering logs had been kept. I'd want to know that the engineers were allowed time to service them correctly, and that they were really good engineers. Okay, that all sounds really rational and a good idea. Who are you flying with? I'm flying with Lufthansa. I'm flying with British Airways. Okay, do you believe that they have good engineers? Yes. Do you believe that they do all the logs and that there's regulations and requirements to make sure that? Yes. You're aware of their safety records. So what we're doing here is we're getting someone to name the fear and then asking what they would like to see, know more about, or have in place in order to minimize that fear. Now, what works with a situation such as a fear of flying can work with a fear of engaging with almost any change, the new IT system, the new process, the new way of working. So when coaching your people, when leading through change, you might want to, if someone's, showing signs of distress or showing signs of being in that stage 2, moving into stage 3, you might say, so look, this represents a change, definitely. What's your key fear or concern about this new system, process, way of working? They share that with you. Okay, so, and by the way, never attack their idea, generally compliment it. Okay, so that seems reasonable as a concern point. What would you like to know, see, or have in place to minimize that? And then when they give you those solutions, see what you can actually have in place. Some things you can't actually show them, some things you won't have in place, but here's an interesting one. Just naming the solution helps to drop the psychological impact of the fear, i.e. how much the fear is taking hold of someone. So get them to talk about their fears to increase their engagement and reduce their resistance with the new system. The next one that we are going to look at can be linked with naming the fear, and we call this linked items. I'm just going to answer Adele's question. Is it best for your story to not be directly linked to the situation and people involved with their colleagues? No, on the contrary, actually, I'd say try and make the story as real as you can. The same with what we're doing with the fear and what we're about to do with linked items. Make this as relatable, as touchable, as easy for someone to relate to as possible. That's where the real power is. I'm just going to pause for a second while I have a sip of tea. Linked items. People will believe something more and engage with it more if you've just told them something they already believe or engaged with. Yes, Core, thank you very much. What we find here is in order to get people to engage with a new system, tell them something they already know or feel or fear to be true. This is incredibly powerful, and I'm just going to test this out with you. I'm going to do a little bit of a gamble here as a virtual trainer. I'm about to do a live experiment with 250 people. Fingers crossed, let's see whether this works. I am going to describe a change, and I'm going to describe it in two ways. What I would like you to do, please, everyone, if you can, is after the first description, I would like you to put in the chat box a rating out of 10 on how engaged you would be with how I've described this change. 10 out of 10 is, I am fully on board. This sounds brilliant. Roll it out now. 0 out of 10 is, get out of here, you lying toad, and stop making my job harder. So your rating is going to be somewhere on that. So I'm going to do this twice. I'll pause in between. Let's see how we go. And the change is just going to be about an email system. That's all. So here we go. Dear ladies and gentlemen, I have excellent news. We are about to implement a new email system. The implementation will take 6 weeks, and in the future, the system will be able to give you greater control of your emails in terms of sorting and sending. The system is going to be better. Okay, rate that one for me now, if you would. Let's see how many comments we get up. Okay, so brilliant. 3, 4, 4, 5, 9, 7, 1, 2. What I'm trying to do is get a really fast snapshot of the averages. So the averages seems reasonably low. Got a few 8s, 9s, and 10s, but a lot of them are hovering around the 3 or 4 mark, I'd guess, as a mean number. Might be interesting actually to do some analysis on this after, because we've got a nice big data set here. It won't work. Someone's been through that change already. Lovely. Okay, now let's have a think about some of the pain points of an email system coming out. The first thing is, are all your contacts going to be ported across all your old messages? Are you going to get training around how to use it? These are really common things. Is this actually going to be better or worse than the old system? These are anyone who's been through an email change. These are the issues that I think affect us. And there's more as well, but these are the main ones. And when we survey and ask, what are the issues? Those are the ones we get back. So I'm now going to give you a second description. Ladies and gentlemen, I have excellent news. We're going to get a new email system. It's going to take about 6 weeks to implement. Now, I've got to say, whenever we survey people on terms of what worries them about a new email system, here are the top 3 things that come out. Will my old contacts be ported to the new system? Will I get training on the new system? Is the new system actually going to be better? So this is going to go live in 6 weeks. We think it's going to give you more control over sorting and sending your emails. I think it's going to be excellent. Rate that one now for me, please. And what I'm going to try and do is get a really fast snapshot. Okay, we've got some more 10s and 9s going up. Yeah, okay, lovely. So yeah, I definitely want to capture this data set that you beautiful people are creating for me here. Pathos 10, great, yeah, showing empathy. So in general, what we're seeing is, we're seeing a shift up the scale. And we're seeing it by a few points going across. And this happens again and again and again when we do this experiment. I just want to point out something. In my second description, I didn't tell you that we were going to solve any of those problems. All I did was relate the problem back to you. I told you what you feared or were concerned to be true. I then linked it with what I wanted you to engage with, that the new email system's coming and it's going to be excellent. This is a really powerful system, and you can link these two together. Name the fear and linked items. Tell someone something they already, well, find out what they're worried about, then replay that back to them, and then mention the thing that they can engage with. You link those two together, you get a really, really powerful influencing technique. If this was more than a 60-minute session, I'd start giving you some examples of where this has been used in politics to drive incredibly powerful change, whether it's positive or negative. I'll let you guys decide. Okay, our last of the 3 really nice advanced influencing techniques. And for me, if there was just one thing that you take from this entire virtual WebEx, indeed, this entire series of WebExes, it will be this one item. It's at the heart of leadership. It's at the heart of leading change. It's at the heart of so many different elements of being a good professional. Ask, don't tell. Single most powerful way to influence someone. People will always believe their own justifications more than ones you give them. Coaching is more powerful than lecturing. Let's say I wanted to sell a car to you. Maybe I would say, so Nicola Davies, I'm talking to you. You don't need to respond in any way, shape or form, but I just needed a person here. So perhaps I'm saying, Nicola, I'd like to sell you a Ferrari. What I want you to do is just think about how beautiful this Ferrari is. It's a brilliant Ferrari. Anyone in a Ferrari looks good. It's just a matter of fact. When you are zooming down the motorway, you are going to look amazing. And Nicola might have a couple of responses. Nicola, feel free to put a response in the question box there, but also you don't have to. Nicola might be thinking, that sleazy, slimy salesperson, or maybe thinking, I look good anyway, you don't need to tell me that. The key thing is that Nicola might have a negative reaction to what I'm saying. If, however, I say, Nicola, anyone looks good in a Ferrari, that's, it's just a statement of fact. I want you to imagine yourself in £350,000 worth of cars zooming down the motorway. You tell me, how do you look? And Nicola, if she's in a Ferrari showroom, is far more likely to say, I look good. I look good in that car. If she's actually fiercely anti-Ferraris, then the answer will be different. People will believe their own justifications for almost anything than the ones you give. And that leads us to this idea that actually, Nicola, not if you've had a midlife crisis. Thank you. This leads us to the idea that through all of the techniques that we've looked at, those story techniques, the chronological call to action, and also the move and mirror technique, asking is the most powerful way to take people through any journey and engage them. And that links us back to something we looked at briefly in the resilience piece, which is the 4 laws of change. So we're going to come on to them in a moment. Very quickly, as you're telling these stories and using these techniques, remember, people are individuals. We also had a very, very quick look at a tool called the Inner Ape tool, a communication tool that looked at how people are motivated in slightly different ways. So make sure you fine tune for your individuals. So what's the key motivator for this person? Is it job safety? Is it doing the right thing? Is it helping others? Is it thriving and aspiring towards a difficult challenge? How am I going to present this information? What channel, what media, what data? So we've touched on this on some of our other sessions as well, but it's always worthwhile thinking, remember, people are individual. So up until now, we've been talking about some generalized tools for taking, in fact, entire populations on a journey with you. Dealing with an individual, make sure you understand the individual point of concern or fear point, etc. Okay, let's have a quick look again at those 4 laws of change. If you weren't on the Resilience WebEx, don't worry, I'm going to introduce them to you now. The 4 laws of change. And this all came about because we did a nice little study that looked at how you can engage people in terms of measured by their productivity with a new process or way of working. So law 1, change is constant, just good to know. Again, I'm not going to do a big dive in here. Current always in change. Sometimes change can feel like it's really big because of how the news portrays it. Imagine being around with some of the social revolutions, the Industrial Revolution, the invention of the Gutenberg printing press. Humanity changes constantly. Absolutely it does. Change is neither good nor bad. It can be either, and it can be both at the same time. It isn't locked into any. In the resilience webinar, we gave the brief example of a new runway being built by an airport. If you work at the airport, change is good. If you live near the airport, change is bad. If you work at the airport and rely on it to pay your mortgage, but also live near the airport and like to sunbathe over a weekend, well, it can be good and bad and both at the same time. So law 2, it's not inexorably either. Law 3. Law 3 is the special bit. Law 3 is what we are all about. If you create the change, you'll embrace it. The chances are you won't even notice it's a change. If the change is forced upon you, you will go through the transition curve. You will have emotion. You will resist the change. It's human. Now, everyone's different. I'm making broad generalizations here. But as overall guidance, if you create the change, you don't notice it's a change. And I'm just going to mention again the experiment that we did here that just confirmed this for us. So I was working with an insurer running a large leadership program. We took cohorts of their leadership, so mid managers and senior managers, and we got them to run this experiment. So We divided a group of 12 people into two groups of 6. We taught everyone how to make a origami paper balloon. We split those two groups into two separate rooms. Group A, we told them their task was to create as many paper balloons in an hour, and they could do it however they wanted to. Invariably, what they did was make a Ford-esque industrial process where each person was doing one particular cut or fold, then passing the piece of paper over to the next person. They had an industrial manufacturing chain that they started. Sometimes they moved desks around or chairs in the office. That was absolutely fine in the training room. Occasionally, they'd even put on motivational music or just chat. The first thing we did with this team, by the way, was ask them to decide their team name. Now, here's the thing. Whatever Team A did, decided, or voted for, we forced upon Team B. Team B, also 6 people, but in another room. They are told their team name. They're told the target of making as many of the product as possible, but they're also told this is how you're going to do it. You will sit in this arrangement. You will do this cut. You will do that fold. At the end of one cycle, in general, the people who had chosen their own path were about 20% more productive. Now, later on in the leadership program, we swapped it around. Again, we taught everyone how to make some origami paper balloons, but this time we allowed Team B all the freedom of choice, and we forced whatever Team B came up with onto Team A. Once again, a general difference in production of around 20%. And both teams are using exactly the same processes, exactly the same materials. The variation is in the power of choice. And there's nothing there you didn't already know because you've been in that situation. I'm quite sure in your lives by now, some brilliant person has coached you to a realization that led you to some steps. Well, hey, everyone, that's a change. I bet also you've had some change forced upon you. We know how we react to those two things. Just quickly, here's law 4. It's just reassuring that. Use anything enough times, it becomes the norm. And remember, it's all about law 3, law 3, law 3. Law 3 is an ask, don't tell. In itself, the 4 laws lead to a set of coaching questions really beautifully. So I'm going to go through some coaching questions on how I might take people through, not just to take them through the transition curve, but to jump the transition curve fully. Shown up, this may be good for you implementing IT. For those of you who shared that you were trying to get a change happening, but without senior support, this is a way you can have a conversation with almost anyone. Watch out for the frameworks kind of showing themselves here. Why do we have our current situation? System or process? What are the challenges it faces? Notice all questions, not statements, all questions. Okay, so if we don't adapt, then, so is our system still fit for purpose? Is the way we are doing things fully capitalizing on any opportunities? Is it fit for the future? Okay, so if we know why it's in place, but it's not fit for the future, what is this an opportunity to do? If we're able to change, what will that mean for us? Okay, I like it. That sounds like a good idea. So to make that happen, what would we need to do next? Okay, this sounds like you've got a really good plan here. What is the next step? What is your next step? So you can see, hopefully, those models coming out there, particularly the chronological story, the call to action story. And what we're doing is we're doing this in a coaching approach. You can use this to take people through the transition curve, but most powerfully, you can use this to lead change the correct way because, and this is where we'll finish, everyone, this is how you lead change. Don't lead change. Empower others to make the change themselves because that's what takes the least amount of effort, the least amount of energy. It is beautifully ethical because you are empowering other human beings, and it is utterly ruthless because it gets your resources committed to a new way of doing something which is better for everyone as quickly as possible. It's one of those beautiful truths of really good leadership. It's both utterly ethical and really effective. It's about getting people switched on. Okay, now by my watch, it is 4:55, just about to ping 4:56. So I need to start wrapping up. As always, I will stay around to answer any particular questions. However, let's do a quick summary of, oh, my apologies. Last final question on those coaching points. Oh, I was doing some bad training there. Do you need any help from me? Always nice to offer that personal one as well. Thank you for the feedback. Excellent. So what we've done today is we've had a look at the leadership attributes for change, and I showed you already have them, and that's something to take away. Is you already know how to do this. You've already got examples of the good and the bad. We've looked at change can be tricky. People naturally resist it. It's the norm. We've got the transition curve. It's a whole roller coaster of emotions. By the way, want to see what that transition curve really looks like? Overlay multiple curves one over the other, because very rarely are we going through just one change at a time. From that, we looked at how we can use stories and emotions to start taking people on the journey with us. We explored the most powerful element of all of this is pathos. We can use logos, we can use the rational as well, but we're missing a trick if we don't activate and use a powerful emotional story. And from that, I showed you a couple of frameworks on how to tell a story. How to tell a story explains what's happening in the future at the moment, what the future may bring, how that is leading to change, and what needs to happen next as well. Finally, we explored the 4 laws of change and some big elements around asking, not telling, and empowering, empowering, empowering. Adele, you've written in there, anything in particular to do differently when the specific change is already underway and you had no involvement in the decision that brought it about? Yeah, absolutely. So for yourself and for leading other people, for yourself, decide what you want to do. Decide where you are on the change curve, where you want to be on the change curve, and what you need to do next. For other people, ask them the same kind of things. Make sure you can understand the history, the reasoning behind the change, and you can communicate that out. So again, we're taking people through that curve. By the way, if you are having to roll out a change that you utterly disagree with, which will happen occasionally, here's how to do that. Be honest about your uncomfortableness, but positive about your approach. For example, you might say, everyone, half the workforce have been furloughed. I hate this. I hate saying goodbye to people. I hate the uncertainty it brings. But here's what I do believe. I absolutely believe that us as a remaining core team can build the business and generate business, A, to bring everyone back, and B, to secure a future for all of us as well. I absolutely believe that what is happening to us now is not good, but I am on board with us as a team. So we're making a clear statement, hey, this isn't great, but also a clear statement of, but we will own our response and we will own the future. It's that kind of statement of strong leadership that can really bring a team together. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, on that, I am going to